Hello. Today we're going to be speaking about human resource management. And specifically, the chapter you're reading is looking at managing employees. So it is vital to have employees with appropriate skills assigned to positions that maximize their expertise in performing the functions of the position. Recruiting and hiring employees are a detailed process that require a considerable amount of planning. Because a manager can actively recruit an employee, they have to determine what type of position they need to hire for and where that position fits in with the organization. This process is called job classification. So the definition of job classification is just that it determines what type of position an organization needs to hire for and simply where that fits in the organizational structure. So job classification places a value on each job that is required to fulfill the mission and goals of the agency. This value determines the compensation and responsibilities associated with the position. And compensation also includes things like benefits, health insurance, vacation and sick leave, and retirement benefits, though these are often coordinated in human resource department. It's very rare that like a recreation manager would actually be dealing with the benefits process. And then this job classification results in a hierarchical compilation of the job title and responsibilities of each job. So here's an example of a job classification. This is for the city of Edmonton for Recreation Technician 1. So I just want to point out this isn't a job ad or a job description. It's a classification system. So you can see they explain what type of work the person is doing, what they're doing, and who oversees them, etc., what union it's in, and it would also do the rate of pay usually as well. On the same Edmonton one, it lists all the different duties that the individual might be doing. And it also lists the knowledge, abilities, and skills. And then the training and experience. Here it says, for example, you've got 12th grade, working with general public, you have to have first aid, CPR, and security clearance, etc. So then that helps, obviously, to determine where this job fits in with the organization, as well as, what the value is of that, how much, pay the person would be getting. So all jobs in a facility have to be analyzed, and that content needs to be organized into a meaningful structure. Job classifications result in all positions having a title that demonstrates the classification of each position within the organization. And then this is usually organized into an organizational chart. So this is a typical organizational chart. This is presented in your textbook, of an athletic facility. You can see you've got the head administrator, and then there's 4 different directors for the different areas: sports, recreation, operations, and administrative, and all these different people who follow them. So this is a typical one that you would see. Here's the organizational chart for St. John's Community Services. So Recreation and Leisure Services is in place here. So in the middle, you've got the Manager of Family and Leisure Services. And under them, or beside them, there's also the Supervisor for Family and Leisure Services, and different program coordinators and field workers then. I just want to point out, I did try to find the Newfoundland and Labrador English School District one to show, but when you can see the organizational structure here, they've got the executive division, they have a human resources division, programs, finance and admin, and operations. I'm not really sure the chart, when I actually click on the links to this, none of it works. And that was last updated in 2016. Here's Hockey Canada. So you can see it's a little different. Hockey Canada is a not-for-profit. So at the top is the members of Hockey Canada who belong. Some of you actually yourselves may belong to Hockey Canada as an affiliate member through Newfoundland Hockey. And then you've got the board of directors. And you can see you've got different committees, and there's members. And then you finally have the president. And underneath them are different working groups and different committees and other types of stakeholders. I tried really hard to find an organizational chart that wasn't typical. Okay, you often think of this bureaucratic structure of, top down. But here's a really nice organizational chart from the Louis Riel School Division. This is in Manitoba. And you can see this is their organizational chart of supporting student learning. And notice this, it's not a hierarchical system. It's an interesting circle. And in the middle is the students. And that also kind of explains the vision. They've made it so the organizational chart also shows the point of this, that, it's around students. I have seen some organizational charts for, healthcare that also do this sort of thing where the patient is in the middle. Here's another example. This is Apple. When Steve Jobs was alive and head of the organization, and you can see he's in the middle, and it's this interesting circular chart that isn't hierarchical as much. Perhaps the size of the obviously the middle CEO is a very large circle, so it might be sort of the size of the shape that kind of reflects your role. Here's another one. It's called an inside-out style, and anyway, basically it puts the head people more in the middle, and then it shows everyone around them more in a team setting. This was Spotify organizational chart. Interesting. They have different things they call, they have tribes, I guess, instead of like divisions. And then within each of those, they have chapters and guilds, squads. They call things all different, and they have it shaped like this. So anyway, sort of interesting to see. I just wanted you to see that an organizational chart doesn't have to be a boring, top-down sort of structure. It can tell a lot about the philosophy of your organization as well. Once the job classification has been determined, the next step is to prepare a job description. The job description is a detailed document that includes all the responsibilities of the position. It usually includes the specific job area, its placement in the organization, and its responsibilities. Obviously, then the purpose of the job description is to get the attention of prospective employees. You want people to apply. It also helps to eliminate unqualified applicants. If you clearly outline, for example, education or experience, then you would, it might help to eliminate people to not apply. It also serves as a contract between an employee and an employer once someone is hired. And job descriptions are also used in performance evaluation and also in training and professional development. So the job description often includes the following: summary of the position, the primary functions, general and specific responsibilities, what the selection criteria is, like what type of, candidate, what they're looking for, and also details on where the person reports to. I just want to mention that these job descriptions should be reviewed regularly, looking at the job responsibilities that have been added or taken away. Jobs evolve and change, and sometimes you end up doing different duties. So it's important that these are updated regularly. Next, we have hiring procedures. Recreation administrators must base hiring decisions on the competency of the person applying for the position, while also taking into consideration laws, ethics, and organizational hiring policies and procedures and practicalities. There are human resource professionals will usually help you. There's usually a lot of policies on this because there are specific laws that you have to follow. So usually you go to your human resource department and they advise you then on the various laws and regulations that apply to the hiring procedures of your organization, as well as the laws of Canada. The basic steps of the hiring process should remain the same for every position in the organization. However, the challenge of selecting the best candidate for the position becomes more demanding as the responsibilities of the position increase. So, the steps in the hiring process. First, you have the job announcement. Then you have applicant screening. Then the interview. Then assessment criteria. And then the job offer. So the first step in recruiting potential candidates for a position is to make a formal job announcement, or it's called a job posting, to create awareness of the opportunity. There's various places where you might advertise. It really depends on the size of the organization. If the organization is public, private, or nonprofit, if it's local, provincial, national, or international, all that kind of depends on where you might advertise. It also depends on the policies or regulations of the organization and the unions involved. For example, at Memorial University, the faculty union, which is called Memorial University's Faculty Association, MUMFA, we have the union, and then therefore the university has rules about where certain things have to be advertised. For example, I believe you're supposed to advertise nationally. And you also have to record all the places that you did advertise. And that's obviously to make it fair. And it's also to make sure that we've covered everywhere, like in Canada. And the announcement then can be advertised lots of places. It could be in the local newspaper, although that's becoming more rare. You might advertise in professional journals or job search websites. On the facility, bulletin boards, even where potential candidates might look. But more often, nowadays, it's a lot on social media and websites. Not as much newspapers. In the job announcement, it's important, obviously, besides the job description and all that, it's important to include the application date. What's the deadline to apply? I've seen job ads that don't include that, so you got to make sure. Also, where and how to apply. We recently we have a job ad out, and I've got some questions, and I realized that the job for the faculty position didn't actually say if we wanted paper copy to be mailed or if it should be emailed, etc. It wasn't as clear. Sometimes it includes salary, sometimes it doesn't. Typically, the higher the education or responsibility of the job, they usually don't mention salaries. And a lot of that has to do with negotiation as well. Typically, though, in public, government jobs, they know what the salary is going to be, so they put it. And then you also have to list what type of application materials. Like, do you want them to include a cover letter? They might have their resume or curriculum vitae. The difference between those is a resume is typically 2 to 3 pages and highlights your experience for that specific job, where a curriculum vitae is kind of more of a list of all of your stuff you've ever done. Usually you have references. Some actually want reference letters, and personally, I don't like that as someone who has to write the reference letters. Usually that's people might ask for reference letters in like round 2 of the application process. And then another thing that people often forget is you should have like a contact person if someone has questions. So once the application deadline has passed, the manager has to review the submitted application materials to determine which candidates to interview. The assessment of the application should be as objective as possible and should be based on the selection criteria and specific screening requirements listed in the job description. So, as an example, we usually, I've been on several hiring committees within HKR, and for example, hiring lab instructors as well as faculty. And usually what we do is we, make sure we read our job description and we create an Excel sheet of the different things that we're looking for. And just as a quick example, we, obviously to be faculty, you need a PhD. So, but a lot of people apply who haven't finished their PhD. So we then rank that sort of thing. So, for example, if we had a lot of applicants, we then basically go through our first screen is to see who has their PhD already and who doesn't. And then often, like if we had quite a few applicants, the people who don't have their PhD are then kind of eliminated already. Or another example would be, let's say a job asked for 5 years of, let's say, teaching experience. Well, you can quickly go through the applicants and, quickly look at that. Who has 5 years and who doesn't? And, can put them in piles. So obviously this screening then really depends on the organization, the job, and how many applicants you get. If you only get a few applicants, then you're not going to screen and scrutinize as much. It's going to happen more in the interview. But if you have 80 applicants, well, then you have to do a first screening. And as I just said, that's usually on meeting the position requirements, like education or years of experience. I know one of the executive director at McMorran Community Center once told me his first screening, like for often for summer positions, was simply like the cover letter in the email. If the cover letter was professional, or if there was tons of spelling and typos, he would put it into the no pile right away. Or for example, this was a lot of high school students. He'd look at their email. Sometimes people had unprofessional email names, and he viewed that as, if someone's applying with, their email address was like Harry Butt at Yahoo or something, they're perhaps not ready yet for a position of authority with children. Then the next screening is usually based on, even more competencies. And you may even have some initial screening interviews or requirements. Like, for example, if you have a lot of applicants, you might quickly do like a telephone interview to narrow it down to the top candidates. So common practice is to interview the top 3 to 5 candidates in a face-to-face interview with the supervising staff member or group of people in the interview. The number of applicants, again, depends on how many applicants you got, how many interviews you're going to do. But also, there's often kind of policies on that. For example, in HKR, I think that, I don't know if it's real, but we seem to always do 3. Occasionally, we might do 4 candidates. So there's a real art to developing interview questions. Whatever the process is that you choose, it's critical that the interview questions are carefully prepared in advance. So you really have to think about them, and there's lots of websites and information for that. And I'm sure all of you have experienced in a job interview some really interesting questions, and then sometimes they ones that seem, I don't know, sort of boring or typical, and I can always wonder what they're actually feel like may not always give thought into it. It's important that you ask the same questions to each candidate to keep the interviews consistent. You need to record notes so that you can compare the candidates. And it's also very important that you avoid all illegal questions. You're not allowed by law to ask about their age, their gender, their disability status, religion, or family status. And as an example to this, if the most difficult one, for example, is if you're interviewing someone and you're pretty sure maybe they're clearly pregnant, well, you may not ask about that. You're not allowed to consider that even. And although that might be difficult. Now, if an individual themselves brings up their family or disability or age or gender or something, that's different, but you're not allowed to ask any questions yourself. And by the way, if you're ever, I have been asked these questions in probably, I don't think people mean to be illegal or anything, but just asking questions. And if you feel uncomfortable, like one time I was in an interview and they asked if I was planning on having children and that sort of thing. And I don't think that I think it was meant to be conversational, like just chitty chatty. But anyway, all I did was just say, I just laughed and said, well, I can answer that, but do you know, you're not really supposed to ask me about that. Or I kind of made a joke, and then they were like, they actually didn't realize that it was illegal. But so you can kind of fluff it off that way if you don't want to answer. I mean, then you have the assessment exercises. So not all interviews have this, but some interviews are really long. For example, most of you have probably had like a half an hour-long interview at the most. Professor jobs, like faculty positions, our interviews are 2 days long, a whole 2 days. So all the meals, and it's back-to-back. It's basically you're being interviewed from the moment you're picked up at the airport, and then 2.5 days later till you're sent off. So there's a lot of different assessments. For example, it's typical in, faculty, like maybe you do a presentation to see how good your presentation skills are, or perhaps you teach a class. Other things might be writing exercises, if there's a lot of writing involved in the job. Different task exercises, like maybe the job requires operating some specialized equipment. Or, for example, my husband has been in, he's a statistician. He's been in jobs where he needed to analyze data, go off in a room and then come back. Computer skills assessment is sometimes done. And as I mentioned, presentations, teaching, facilitating a workshop, that kind of thing. Then is the job offer. So the candidates are ranked in order from your first choice to the last, and then the job offer and negotiation starts. So this is usually then often it depends on the organization, but quite often the job offer, like a manager, is not actually involved. If you're a recreation manager, quite often this then goes up to human resource or even your boss. But this then has the hourly wage or salary, any benefits are outlined, vacation, stuff like if there's expense accounts or vehicle use, all the different things. And you then offer the job. But the top candidate may not accept the offer, and that the job is offered to the second best candidate. It goes down the list. And eventually then an employee contract is signed, and usually the job candidates, usually just the people you interviewed, are notified that the position has been filled. So now you have a new employee. So now it's important to really think about job training. And I think that this is something, in my opinion, that is not well done in any job, really, but especially, I think, not always very good in recreation positions. So the goal of any training program should be to provide new employees with every opportunity to succeed in their new position. And this training could include on-the-job training, and it might be from meeting with various staff, like administration, supervisors, and coworkers. Often there's workshops or retreats and other professional development opportunities may be offered, and like to further the development of knowledge about their position. So, and there could be training in, technical areas as well. So, this is an important part. And often, I just want to point out, in many jobs, when accidents have happened, health and safety, it's often because proper job training was not done. So it's really important. And another part of human resource management is not just job training, but obviously performance appraisal. So a manager has to monitor, assess, motivate, and offer constructive input to employees. They have to assess employee performance and correct areas where expectations are met. And also not. So I think this is something that is often not done well. I'm sure you've all had jobs where there's someone who never does their job very well. I've been in these positions, and the supervisor keeps changing, and so no one ever deals with this employee who's not doing a very good job. And when I look at that, I feel like it's not the employee's fault. I feel like it's the supervisor's fault, where they have never corrected or provided feedback. You can't, how can someone know that they're not doing a very good job or that how to improve if no one is telling them that? And the performance appraisal is usually a formal process resulting from observation and evaluation of employee in an effort to assess how the employee is meeting expectations. And supervisors and employees are usually discuss what the supervisor's expectations are and whether or not the employee is meeting those. And obviously, if someone is consistently not meeting expectations, termination can occur, and there's usually policies and procedures to follow and laws. So now we're now going to turn to a discussion about the types of employees in an organization. So managers often really underestimate how much is involved in keeping an organization at its optimal level of operation. There are usually a lot, especially at a large facility, a public facility or hospital or school, for example. There's a lot of different employees that we often don't appreciate. So there's internal employees. Obviously, these are people who work directly inside the organization. They're administrative, supervisory, specialists, and also maintenance or operations employees. And I'm going to go through each of these. So administrative employees represent the executive level of an organization. The highest level person may be what's called, the CEO. In the private sector, they would be called an administrator or director in the public or nonprofit sectors. The person's role is to make all decisions that affect the mission and vision of the organization. And this person may or may not be involved in the day-to-day operational decisions of organizations, depending on the complexity and size. As an example, think of the dean. In human kinetics and recreation, we're a fairly small unit. We have a small building. We have, I'm not exactly sure, let's say 16 faculty members, compared to, let's say science, which might have 75 or something. For example, our dean is very visible. We see her walking in the halls a lot, coming to events, and that's also the nature of HKR. Whereas in science, you might not see the dean very often. Again, it's because they might not be involved as much in the day-to-day things. So another type of administrative employee is a facility manager. They're usually representative of the owner or administration. They're in charge of daily facility operations. Facility managers may need years of experience or specific certifications or degrees in order to do these responsibilities. They're often in charge of facility operations, employees, budgeting, office management, and all other responsibilities that support the administration of the facility. Then we have supervisors. So obviously, a supervisor is responsible for a certain number of employees. They have some subordinate employees that they supervise. It could be, it could be a whole bunch. It could be like 30 employees, or it might just be in a small unit. You might be supervising just 3 or 4. Supervisors have responsibility for the employee in their area, and they have to accept the responsibility for the tasks that they're given by their superiors. And they are also representatives of the administration and are often held responsible for their employees' performance. So supervisors are, maybe they're not making high-level decisions, but they're responsible for the decisions in their unit, and they're often responsible for, hiring and managing employees that they supervise. Another type of internal employee is a specialist. There are several job functions in organizations require specialized employees or specialists who have received training to assist in the delivery of recreation product or service. And in terms of recreation and leisure activities, they might be, these people might be like an aquatics instructor, or therapeutic recreation, or fitness. They often have a specific certification or, skill set. I'm thinking also like athletic care, all the personal training, that sort of thing. Another internal employee is maintenance and operations. Maintenance employees consist of skilled, semi-skilled, and sometimes non-skilled employees. This is like cleaning, upkeep, and minor repairs. They might do some specialized tasks such as plumbing or welding. And the size and classification system that the agency uses really decides how many maintenance employees someone has. For example, Memorial has a very large facility maintenance and operations staff, whereas a community center may just have one person. And as the agency increases in size, maintenance responsibilities become greater and more specialized. And you have to really think of you don't often think of this, but as an example, my friend, I have a friend who is a construction worker, and he a carpenter, and he, for example, he works for Stratford Festival, in Stratford, Ontario, where they put on the big plays like Shakespeare plays. You wouldn't think of that as needing a carpenter, but there's many, many buildings. He doesn't help with sets, but those buildings need to be maintained, so he is doing that then. So now there are external employees. So these are people who basically are on contracts. Many of the functions in the facility are accomplished by external or outside companies or people. And this is usually done through, outsourcing is what they call it. So it's often, outsourcing is often done sometimes when a recreation organization is relatively small, especially when you might have specific things that need to be done by someone, but you don't need it all the time. It might be an infrequent task. So outsourcing can be a viable option when the agency cannot afford to have a full-time staff person or a particular facility needed. It's very cost efficient. External employees can be maintenance experts, vendors, and volunteers, and often you create a contract with them based on the service provided. Now, in the text, it really talks about this being more for smaller, but outsourcing is happening more and more and more. For example, it's becoming much more popular in government and hospital settings. For example, in some areas now, they the healthcare system itself, the government might not be doing blood collection. They're hiring an outside company to do blood collection, that sort of thing. So one type of external employee might be management professionals. So these might be they're required to be part of the administration and delivery of a product, but you might not need them as often. So, for example, an accountant. You might, if an organization isn't very large, it's not going to have an internal accountant who works there year round. It's someone that you have a contract with, and they might even just come to your organization for a week or something. It could be lawyers and legal professionals, medical professionals. That might be, for example, professional sports often has external employees on contract. Or, for example, I had a friend in St. John's. He's a nurse, and he was under contract to be a medical person on site during the filming of the Republic of Doyle TV show. Because they have explosives and that kind of thing happening. Architects and engineers are often. Horticultural landscape professionals. For example, there is like the School of Human Kinetics and Recreation hires someone as a contract, someone to maintain the plants, like decide which plants we have and come in and maintain them, I think once a month or whatever. You also might have consultants, like these could be consultants for evaluation or strategic planning. For example, I've been hired as a consultant for doing evaluation surveys, needs assessments, etc. Then you might have field experts. These are really like the specialists who are hired and trained within the agency, but they're just external. They respond to certain problems. So they might have a specific trade. This could be like plumbers, electricians, arborists, that's a tree surgeon, contractors, laborers. For example, in the School of Human Kinetics and Recreation, we have several Xerox, photocopiers. There's those, the maintenance for those is under contract. And so we call someone and they're under contract then to come and, help with the equipment. This is also often done, like, let's say if you have a lot of large sporting equipment, there's sometimes, agreements that there's maintenance that you will have an external person to be able to come in to help maintain. Vendors are often external to the organization. And vendors can be, there's so many different types, but so it really depends on the organization. But you often create like a relationship with these people. And so these are people who sell products for recreation and leisure and physical education or facilities management. So it could be like fertilizer, even like for the fields to maintain them. Concessions, like, have it like vending machines and all that. Sports supplies. You might have services that you vend out, like lawn mowing and snow removal or uniform laundering. And if you've ever, I don't know if you ever have an opportunity to go to like a recreation conference, professional one, there's often like a vending area at conferences where you can go and talk to these people. For example, Recreation Newfoundland and Labrador, for their annual conference, they always have one night that's like for the vendors, and you can go around and speak to the different local products and services in Atlantic Canada. And the final type of external employees, volunteers. We're going to be talking about volunteers as a unit itself later, but I just want to mention them here. Although not technically really an employee, they are external workforce that is beneficial to the delivery of services. And, many municipal and not-for-profit use volunteers, and they really help to fulfill a lot of responsibilities. And they should be looked at as a type of employee, and also in a way they're also a type of program. Some people volunteer because they like to, like it's their recreation and leisure. We also have to consider the work environment. So employees perform best when they're in a comfortable and safe work environment. And it's important as an administrator that you work on creating this safe and appropriate environment to meet people, so that people can do their job properly without stress. And this is about work assignments have to be thoroughly thought out and organized and presented. And you also have to be thinking of workplace health and safety. And that's not just about accidents, but it's about physical and mental health as well. And I apologize, I'm not sure why I have this exact same slide again. But anyway, so yes, it's important that you are thinking about the work environment. All right, I hope that you learned a little bit more about then, how the importance of managing employees. Obviously, if you're actually a manager, you would go and do some further education. If this is even something you're interested in, you can. There's other courses on human resource management. There's degrees on human resource management. It's something that someone can do. There's college certificates as well as university degrees and master's degrees in this.